Today, we are diving deep into one of the biggest demographic stories of our time, India's journey to becoming the most populous nation on Earth. And let me tell you, it is quite a story, full of explosive growth, some really serious unintended consequences, and a powerful force that's still shaping the future for over 1 billion people.
So let's just start with the number, just to let it sink in. Right now, India is home to more than 1.4 billion people. To put that into perspective, that's more people than in all of Europe, all of Africa, or the Americas combined. It's a number so huge it's almost impossible to wrap your head around, and it begs a pretty important question.
Right. How did this happen? How did a single country's population get so massive? Well, it wasn't just some accident. It's a really complex story about medicine, culture, politics, and it all came together to create this demographic juggernaut that's still moving at full speed today.
And to really get it, you have to go back in time. We're going to start right after India gained its independence in 1947. The country was brand new, and a few key things that happened back then set this whole incredible story in motion.
You can really break the whole journey down into 4 main acts. First, you've got the 50s and 60s, which is when the engine really ignited. Then came the 70s, which took a really dark, coercive turn. After that, things started to slow down in the 90s. And that brings us to today, where this incredible momentum just keeps pushing the numbers up. Let's start with that first act.
So here's the simple but incredibly powerful equation that started the whole explosion. On one side, you had amazing public health improvements, things like vaccinations for smallpox and controlling malaria. Suddenly, death rates just plummeted. People, especially kids, weren't dying from these preventable diseases anymore. But, and this is the key, on the other side, the birth rate stayed super high. We're talking 5 or 6 children per woman. That massive gap between falling deaths and high births, well, that was the rocket fuel.
Okay, so by the 1970s, the government was getting seriously alarmed by this rapid growth, and they took some drastic actions. During a period called the Emergency, from 1975 to 77, a coercive mass sterilization program was launched. It was a complete disaster. It shattered public trust in the entire idea of family planning for decades. People became incredibly fearful and resistant, which, ironically, actually caused the decline in fertility to stall out.
And all of that brings us to today, into a really fascinating paradox. You see, Indian families are actually getting a lot smaller, but the population is still growing like crazy. So how is that even possible? Well, the answer comes down to one single powerful demographic idea. And that idea is called population momentum. Honestly, the best way to picture it is to think of a massive, heavy flywheel. For decades, a high birth rate was pushing that wheel, making it spin faster and faster and faster. Now, even though the pushing has slowed way down, that wheel has so much built-up momentum that it's just going to keep spinning for decades before it even thinks about slowing down. That's exactly what's happening in India right now.
And you can see just how much the pushing has slowed down right here. Back in the 1990s, the average woman in India had about 3.6 children. But today, that number, the total fertility rate, has dropped all the way to 2.0. That's basically at what we call replacement level. It's the number of kids needed to keep a population stable. So for all intents and purposes, the pushing on that flywheel has stopped.
Which, brings us right back to that huge paradox. If couples are now having, on average, just 2 kids, why is the country still adding millions and millions of people every single year?
And the answer is actually really simple. The generation that was born during those super high growth decades, the 80s and 90s, was absolutely massive. And now that huge group of people is in their prime childbearing years. So even if every couple has only 2 kids, the sheer number of parents is so enormous that the total number of births is still incredibly high. That, right there, is population momentum in action.
But this growth isn't happening evenly across the country. Not at all. India is really a tale of 2 different demographic stories. You look at the southern states, where female literacy and economic development are higher, and fertility rates are way below replacement level. But then you look at the big northern states, where fertility rates are still quite high, and they are now the primary engines of India's population growth.
So we've talked about the numbers, we've talked about the reasons why, but what does all this actually mean for the 1.4 billion people living this reality every day? What's the human price of these demographics?
This quote, I think, just hits the nail on the head. When you have this many people packed together, life can become a constant struggle. Where the basic fight for resources, for a job, for just a little bit of space on the train can overshadow almost everything else.
And that struggle, for so many, starts with trying to find work. A staggering 23% youth unemployment rate. Think about that. That means almost 1 out of every 4 young Indians actively looking for a job can't find one. The economy just cannot create jobs fast enough for the millions of people pouring into the workforce every single year.
The strain on resources is also just immense, and you see it most critically with water. 21 major Indian cities, we're talking big tech hubs and even the capital city, are projected to run out of groundwater very, very soon. The demand from so many people is literally draining the country dry. And this constant pressure forces people into unbelievably crowded spaces. For an astonishing 65 million people, home is an urban slum. That's more than the entire population of the United Kingdom, all living in informal settlements with little access to proper sanitation or infrastructure.
And you know, the consequences just ripple out into every part of life. It means overcrowded schools and packed hospitals. It means tremendous damage to the environment. It means public infrastructure that is just constantly overwhelmed, and this underlying social stress that comes from having to compete for absolutely everything all the time.
So, after all that, what's next? What does the future actually hold? Because this story is far from over. That demographic flywheel we talked about, it is still spinning, and it's spinning powerfully. Because of that population momentum, even with smaller family sizes, the population is projected to keep on growing for another 3 or 4 decades. The peak is expected to come around the year 2060, at a colossal 1.7 billion people, before it finally slowly begins to decline. And that leaves us with this final, really critical question. You always hear that India's greatest asset is its people, its young population, the so-called demographic dividend. And in so many ways, that's true. But what happens when that exact same thing, the sheer number of people, is also its single greatest challenge? Figuring out how to navigate that deep paradox? Well, that's going to be the defining task for India for the rest of this century.